there's 3 members off with the driver and all. They're just put in mode, taking them into custody here.
Welcome back to the Code Podcast. Got my buddy here, Rich McKeegan, aka the Scarecrow, episode 23.
23.
Yeah, it's been a little while. We were busy with the holidays and stuff, and we're not Joe Rogan. We don't do this for money, so it's just more like we didn't have quite the time, but we're back.
Yeah, excited about it. 2022.
Yeah, hopefully it's not 2020 part 2.
I hated that.
Oh, I heard someone say that. I'm like, oh God, please don't say that.
No.
So hopefully, so far it's been good, but we'll have to see. So this next guy that we're having on today, met him on social media, fellow cop, fellow BJJ black belt. Great all-around guy. Came up and did the Officer Survival Series program with us when we went through that, and I was impressed right away because he's like, hey, I want to come up and do this class, and I'm like, oh yeah, well you're already a black belt. You can just come up and kind of hang out and help us out a little bit. He's like, oh no. I want to do it as a student. I want to go through it like any normal person would, because that's how I'm gonna, get a feel for it. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. That's why he's a black belt, because he's willing. He's willing to put the work in when others would take it as a an easy ride. So anyway, I wore a special shirt for him today because he's from New York. So DJ Delaney, welcome.
Hey, what's going on? Hey, just so you know, I wore underneath my uniform here. I wore a special shirt for you today too. Yeah, I got my Bushido shirt on.
Oh, look at that! Hey, nice, our Academy shirt. Yeah,
yep,
I wear the Red Sox shirt. I know you're probably a Yankees fan, but
fortunately, I'm a Mets fan, so I actually like the Boston Red Sox, and I'm particularly very fond of Bill Buckner.
In 1986, it was actually Bob Stanley's fault. Everybody blames Buckner, but Bob Stanley had a screw up in that series too that led to some problems. But hey, all water under the bridge. Since then, we have won several world championships, and I believe the Mets are still searching. So
yeah, we're still searching. Mets stands for my entire team sucks. So yeah, it's terrible. And it's crazy. I learned a little bit about Bill Buckner later on. He actually should be in the Hall of Fame, but that one play is what they remember him for.
Unbelievable.
He holds the record for in the park home runs.
Really?
Yeah. Look that one up. I think it's like 12.
Wow, I would have never guessed that in a million years. I got to be honest with you, because I remember him not being able to run so well and this and that. So, but
amazing.
It's insanity.
So you train Monster MMA on Long Island. I was just down there a few weeks ago. We did that seminar down there. It was awesome. And you run 10-1 BJJ. If you could kind of explain maybe your background, how you got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what your background is, so our viewers and listeners know, and kind of how you started with all this. And I know you're an Invictus sponsored athlete as well, so kind of lay out the ground of how this all came to be for you.
Yeah, so I was pretty lucky. I lived down in Florida for a little bit after I graduated high school, and before I moved down, I took the test to get on the city police job. So I moved back up here in 1995, and because there was a big merger between housing transit and the regular police, I actually didn't get on in 95. So I was kind of like stuck up here, and I just started taking civil service tests. So I took the local test for the sheriff's office. And if you're from New York or on Long Island, it's like Suffolk County Sheriff's Office was the best kept secret because nobody really knew about us or what we did. Because the way it's broken up here in New York State, with the different agencies and all that, it's like no one really knew who we were. So I didn't even know about the job at all to begin with. So I took the test and I got on. I went to the academy and I started in 2000. And I had never wrestled. I never did any sort of stuff. I was always on academic probation at school. I was not the best of students, so that's why I didn't do any sports. But while I was at the academy, during our 40 hours or 5 days of DT, I was kind of like, wow, I kind of like this. I think I just really like the fact of, the competitiveness of it. It's that old school, man against man, this and that. I liked it. And I ended up talking to the DT instructors at the time. And one of the instructors' name was John Mizich. Rest his soul. Unfortunately, we lost him at a very young age due to, I believe it was a heart attack, just one of those things. And, but he told me, he goes, hey, I see you really like this kid. I'm like, yeah, I really do. And he told me, he goes, I'm going to tell you right now, you will never get any more training defensive tactics wise from our agency, from any law enforcement entity. So if it's something you like and something you think you want to do, definitely go find it, and it'll definitely be valuable. I just took those words from him, I guess, pretty seriously, because I then went out right after I graduated the academy, and I started in Taekwondo. And I have no rhythm. I can't dance. I am terrible. And just doing those katas and these kicks and everything, I was like, this really isn't, it's great. Taekwondo is, I'm not bashing anyone, but I'm like, it really doesn't fit for what I believe I need it for in this line of work. And then I went into one of the gyms I was working at, and there was a guy in the back who was training jiu-jitsu. Now, this is early 2001. And I said, hey, let me try this. And from that point on, I fell in love with it. And I've been training ever since. My journey's been pretty good. I started with this guy who wasn't branded, didn't even have a school. He was just kind of doing it rogue in the back. And then, Kyoto Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu opened up here. So I started under Kyoto. And then the guy that I started with ended up leaving and going to Colorado. He became a state trooper out there. So I fell under this guy, Milton Regis, who's very, very good at teaching and jiu-jitsu in general, and a good person. And I trained under him for a little while, but then he moved academies. So I was kind of like, I can't do this drive. I had twins that were just born. So then I started training out at Matt Serra's place in Huntington. So from white to blue, I was at Kyoto. Then from blue, pretty much through the duration of my tenure, was under a Serra flag because when I was deployed, when I came home, one of the instructors that were there that I really enjoyed learning from, Rich Corfage, he moved to Lineher. So it was a quick, easy, that was right around the block from my house. So I talked to Matt. Matt said, no, definitely train there. So I ended up getting my black belt from Rich Corfage, who I believe is either the number 1 or number 2 black belt underneath Matt Serra when they first started back in the days, back from the barn. So, it's I just fell in love with it. I just liked it, and I just kept on training and kept on going at it. Done competitions. I competed in Army combatives tournaments. So it's something I love. I think what I really love about it is it's helped me physically, mentally. It helps keep you cool under pressure without even realizing. It teaches you how to breathe. So there's a lot of things that you learn in jiu-jitsu that you don't even know how it transfers over into our line of work until it actually comes time for when you have to use it, and all of a sudden things start working good. So it's just, I love the concept of training as a team and working with so many people, but when it comes down to competition time, it's you and your opponent. And so now everything is on you. The team gets you ready, but at the end of the day, the competition and getting ready for your opponents is on you. So that's really why I like it. And think about it, wrestling goes back all the way back how far. So it's got a lot of history. So that's pretty much my background in that. I got my black belt in 2015. And, due to me moving and life stuff, I moved up to the North Shore here on Long Island. And in 2016, I started training over at Monster, which is a very cop-heavy jiu-jitsu academy because one of the owners is a cop here in Suffolk. And just a great environment. And it's the environment. I mean, Rob, you were up there. Everybody up there loved you. I mean, it's just a great place to train. Good vibes only.
Yeah, I loved it there. It reminded me a lot of because the building you've come to at my place, that's my let me see, that's my 5th or 6th building that I've been in over the years. But the place that I went down for you guys reminded me heavily of one of my previous academies that I had, which I loved because I loved the intimate atmosphere of it, and everybody training up close and personal. It was very, very reminded me of one of my other academies I had, which I missed that place a lot sometimes. Kind of like a club atmosphere, like really tight, close knit.
Well, I definitely love the close, tight-knit atmosphere, except when you have a 300-pound person being thrown on top of you, because you know how it gets tight in there sometimes, and we just go at it. But it's part of the grind, man, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's one of the first experiences I've ever had of training on a mat with a actual Christmas tree on the mat.
Yeah, it's crazy. They're big into the holidays up there. Halloween is a big one, we do it for the kids, but yeah, that's tradition up there. And then we had the Clark Griswold getting electrocuted blow up in the back corner.
Yeah, it wasn't like off on; it was literally on the mat. You grappled around it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, we don't put Christmas ornaments on it. Just belts. That way, if anything falls off, no one's getting hurt.
So what's 10-1 BJJ? How do you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, so I train at Monster. So Monster's a gym I train at. And being that I like doing jiu-jitsu, and I now teach at the Academy Bureau here, and it's just something that's been close to me for a long time. is, and I started watching how people do it. I was like, I'm going to get ready to retire. And when I retire from here, I still want to do jiu-jitsu and I still want to help law enforcement to make sure they get home at the end of the night. I'm like, so let me create like my own little entity, just specific for like law enforcement. That's our goal, but still includes sport and self-defense in it as well. So I'm like, wow, what do I name this thing? So I came up with 10-1 because in Long Island, 10-1 is a radio call, one of the 10 codes for officer needs help. Now, the thing gets confusing about that. If you go into the city, it's a 1013. Out here, it's a 10-1. So a lot of people miss 10-1 as what it really stands for. So 10-1 is officer needs help. So I want to use that to say, hey, if you need help, training, getting better with your defensive tactics in this night, come to us. And I'm a true believer that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a good, strong foundation to base it on. I'm not saying it's the end all, but it's a good, strong foundation. So that's why I went with 10-1 BJJ. And some people think it's 101, like beginner basics, which works out too, because we do try to keep it very basic, not so crazy when we're dealing with law enforcement. But so 10-1 is just an officer 10 code for us here on Long Island. That means officer needs help.
That's awesome. Yeah, up here it's a 10-0 in most places. 10-0,
Right.
ups or down. Yeah. But I kind of figured that's what it meant, but I knew that the viewers might not know that. So I figured.
Yeah, and that's why I had that logo when I changed it to actually I have right 10-1. That way, hopefully it picks up and people see it more as a 10-1 and not 101. So, but at the end game, I don't care what they call it, as long as anything we put out is good for people who want to use it for good. That's what I'm looking for.
That's awesome.
So it's interesting you sat there and you said that you do sport jiu-jitsu as well, especially with the officers. Sometimes you get new people coming in, maybe officers. They're like, well, I don't need sport jiu-jitsu, just the self-defense aspect of it. And I try and relay to them that they both go hand in hand. You're going to learn some good stuff from sport jiu-jitsu. And it's like, how do you convey that to people coming on board with you?
Well, see, that's the thing. You always get these people who say, oh, sports jiu-jitsu, it's really not, it's not really, it's a gentle art. You're not going to use that in the street because who's going to go down into like an X guard or who's going to pull guard? And they're right. We're not going to do that. But if you practice sports jiu-jitsu and you end up in a position where you can transition to that, then it's beneficial. And they say, well, I'm going to bite you and you're not going to be able to do that. Yeah, well, in a combat situation, I'm not just going to do the gentle art of sport jiu-jitsu, because that's not how this was founded. The Gracies founded jiu-jitsu and really made it famous by going to other gyms and really like beating the hell out of people. And there was nothing gentle about it. I'm actually going to post a video, I think tomorrow, because we're working on X Guard right now. And there's a video that came out a while ago, and I wanted to do it a while ago, and I forgot, and I got off the X Guard. But there was a city corrections guy, I believe a captain, who was walking through a housing unit, and he got sucker punched from behind, and he ended up on the ground on his side with the inmate on top of him. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh, okay. Now, if he would have known the position of sport jiu-jitsu and X Guard, he could have rolled over into that X Guard position and just kept that guy off balance, and not to stay there and do like a fancy sweep or a submission, but to do a tactical getup, to control him so that he wasn't being struck. Because you and Rob know that when you're in the X Guard position, if it's hooked up right, if I rock forward, rock backwards, or left or right, they can't punch because they have to keep their balance. So if he would have known the aspect of sport jiu-jitsu just a little bit, at least understand that position, how it works, he could have used sport jiu-jitsu to get up from a position that he was put in, not that he wanted to be in, but that he found himself in. Instead, he curled up in a ball and prayed for help, or until somebody else got there. Unfortunately, his partner ended up running away, so he was kind of stuck there for a little while. And like I said, I'm not saying go to X Guard, in a law enforcement capacity, but if you do include the sport jiu-jitsu, in a scenario, a fight dynamic, it could be beneficial to get you back up onto your feet and into that dominant position. And that's what I would be looking for in that.
What's interesting to me is when people say that, I ask them, I say, what is the sport of jiu-jitsu? What is it? You know what it is? It's controlling another human being that doesn't want to be controlled. It's holding them in positions that they're trying to get out of while you keep them there against their will. And it's subduing them with submission locks, potentially snapping their arms or legs,
Right.
or putting them unconscious with various restraints. So yeah, that's the sport. And so I think that in that case, this came up. This weekend I was down at Reality Fighting in Mohegan Sun watching a bunch of the matches. You remember Will Kerr? He was in your your class with
Yeah, he's a beast, that guy.
he was there at the grappling match, a few other people I know, and I'm sitting there in the stands, and a bunch of people start talking about because they have grappling matches before they have in the cage, before they have the actual MMA fights, kind of like a warm-up thing.
Mm-hmm.
And someone's like, oh, you know, they started saying, oh, what's the next fight? And someone said, it's not a fight, it's a match, you know? And then, you know, they're like, well, because it's not a fight until it's MMA. And then another person, and I kind of agreed with that at first. And then someone else is like, well, if you went to a boxing match, would you call that a fight? They can't strangle each other. They can't break each other's arms. They can't take each other down. They're eliminating an entire part of combat, but yet still calling it a fight. But yet in grappling, they're going to say, because they're not punching, it's not a fight. And I think they can go both ways. What do you think?
Oh, listen, I call it a fight because, listen, no matter what, if it's, let's say you get into a fight in a bar, most bar fights are grappling, but we call it a bar fight. And most of the time they're hugging and doing all this. They're really not throwing effective punches or anything. It comes down to the grappling aspect of it, because that's what most fights are. They're not at distance all the time. And I would agree with that. You know, I would say grappling and or jiu-jitsu is absolutely a fight. It's a one dimension of a fight. It's not the complete thing. MMA is like a complete fight because you could do all aspects, wrestling, you know, kicking and all that. But to say that grappling or jiu-jitsu isn't a fight, all right, well, I'll beg to differ, because you and I've done it. And, you know, I guarantee you, if we got into a fight with someone on the street, they would say, oh, I lost that fight just based off of grappling and stuff, you know? So that's just the ego thing. And you know what, maybe it's just not people wanting to see the big picture of it, or saying that, oh, mine is the best and this is the only thing that consists of a fight. You know, I don't know. I'm 48. I really have no desire to be punched in the face right now during a fight. So if you want to put a grappling competition, I'll do a competition. But no, I believe it's a fight in my eyes, you know, because look at all the law enforcement stuff. You'll say that that's a fight, right? The subject was fighting you, but were punches thrown or was it grappling? So if it's not that, then we can't call that a fight either. So I would agree with you. It's definitely an aspect of fighting.
I would say it's more on the, and I'm not saying this in like a malicious way, but ignorance. You know, it's like you have people that it's like going to Buffalo Wild Wings and stand them up. You know, it's people that don't understand exactly what's going on. So when they sit there and see a grappling match, that's all it is to them. It's just a match, because they don't see the intricacies of what's actually going on in a fight.
You know what was funny too is at the same moment that this person was talking about this, a fight broke out in the crowd, not in the ring and not in the cage, but in the crowd. And all the people are rushing to it, and the security, and there's cops coming out, and there was no punches thrown. It was all people grabbing at a guy, and he's grabbing back. They're pushing back and forth, and trying to throw each other to the ground. And no one ever punched anybody. So I said to the guy, would you go home now and say a fight broke out in the crowd? He's like, yeah, you got me. That's what I would say.
Yeah. It is
all 5 realms of fighting. I mean, you figure you can break it down to striking, clinching, takedowns, grappling on the ground, and weapons, right? How many fights include all 5 of those ranges?
Not many.
Not many.
How many fights? So all the ranges are always included in a fight. It just matters, like, listen, if someone's a kicker, if you stay inside their range, now you're not in their kicking range, but now you're entering that other range. So all 5 are always there at the beginning of a fight. It just depends on, how you want to manage the space. You want to be close? Well, now I take out kicking, but now I'm adding the wrestling and the grappling and all that other stuff and the punching. So yeah, all 5 ranges are always there, and there's a potential of it. But I'd have to agree with Rich. It's ignorance, or people thinking that their skill set is the only skill set, and then everything else is not up to par.
You can think of a gunfight, right? No punches at all thrown potentially if you're at distance. People they would classify it a gunfight. So fighting's fighting, I guess.
Yeah, and anytime somebody's in my personal space and I need to defend it, it's a fight. That's the way I look at it. You come inside my bubble uninvited, it's going to be a fight. I don't care how it ends up, whether it's kicking, punching, down on the ground, whatever. Don't come in my personal space. Everything inside that, I'm considering a fight.
Now, coming up in the way you did in the Serra lineage, I mean, it's like Matt Serra is one of the first ones to really come out from the East Coast, especially in New York. Amazing UFC fighter, champion, when he beat George St. Pierre. So was it Ray Longo? You know,
Yep, Ray Long goes up there with those guys. I listen. It's crazy because I came into I transferred from Kyoto over to Mass just when he won the championship the first time, and like I didn't really know him. And I have to say, Matt is probably the most the nicest person you ever want to meet. I mean, just very down to earth. He's just a really, really good guy. I enjoyed all my training there. All the instructors I had there were all top notch. You know, and then, you know, all the fighters he had in there, I had the luxury of, you know, just because of my size, you know, he'd be like, hey, Chris, just come roll with this guy. And I was a blue belt at the time, so I was getting hammered. But he's like, hey, come roll with this guy, you know, come roll with this guy. And then I remember when Matt was getting ready for his second fight, he was working on the leg lockdown because that's one of the things he wanted to work, you know, in case George St. Pierre got it. And that's why during that fight, when he actually locked that leg lockdown down, I was like, oh, there he is. He's going to sweep now, this and that. And, you know, of course, George St. Pierre kept it and started throwing those incredible knees. But I have to say, for how small but big Matt is, very, very strong. His base is crazy. Just his it's just amazing. It's like when you go with Rob, like you look at Rob and you're like, ah, but then when he gets on top, he just that unlimited amount of pressure. It's just like where does this human being get that all from? And he's just at a different level. Plus, he's a gymnast. I mean, the guy can do all sorts of stuff. So it was crazy training with him and then seeing it. And then everybody's like, well, you know, he got lucky on that first fight. I've seen Matt hit bags. He throws Cineblocks. So there was nothing lucky on that punch. He landed it. That was the thing. He landed it and his hands were heavy. And, you know, that's how he won it. But even when he was the champion, just down to earth guy, I invited him to a fundraiser we were having up here for veterans. No questions. I'll be there. Shows up. No questions asked. Hung out for hours just talking with people. So it was actually pretty cool. You know, he's really good. There's really only one person that I've ever seen come close or even, you know, mirror Matt's talents, and that's the guy, Derek, that owns Monster. He's a phenom. I've never seen a stronger human being in my life. So, like I said, I've been very lucky to be in good camps and you know, see, you know, all these, you know, listen, I'm an average Joe compared to these people. When you actually train with the professionals, like even with that guy, Kerr, it's like it's just a different level. You know, it's just that's that next level up from what I do is just a, you know, average Joe training jiu-jitsu. So I'm blessed that I was able to have that path.
So how'd you get hooked up with Invictus?
So, you know, I'm doing this 10-1 thing and I'm kind of like, I want to do this, but now I'm trying to work out my retirement because I got 3 more years to go. I can retire in August of 2025. So my goal was always to retire in that time, in a 25-year frame, and get out. And then I just wanted to continue this. So I said, just let me start building this thing very slowly. And hopefully by the time I get to retire, I can do maybe one seminar a month or one every 2 or 3 months, you know, my pension, make a little extra money. And that was my goal. And then all of a sudden I saw Invictus put this thing out there. Hey, we're looking to sponsor an athlete. I was like, you know what? There are probably so many high-level people out there. I'm like, you know, but it's like shit. We got to be in it to win it. So I put the request that they had asked for, you know, to be a sponsored athlete, you know, like an agency I work for, any other history. I put my military on there, all the training I have, all the things that I've done throughout, you know, my career and even on the outside, because I ran a not-for-profit for a long time. And so I put that all out there, and then, you know, I just sit and waiting. And I'm like, they got to be coming out with this soon. And there was nothing. And then all of a sudden, I believe it was like January of 2021. Yeah, I woke up one morning and I look at the phone as like Invictus, and I was expecting to see, you know, thank you for submitting it, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it actually said, hey, thank you for submitting. We chose you. And I was like, holy smokes. I was like, what? I was pumped because I was like, all right. And then joining them, you know, and being sponsored by them has been nothing but beneficial for me in a lot of ways. It, you know, got me a little bit more exposure, got me out there a little bit more. But for me, it's not about that. I got to be honest with you. I mean, trust me, that's good. But like through Invictus and through this social media thing, I was able to meet you guys. I was able to meet all the guys from Invictus and all their affiliates. And, you know, I had the opportunity to finally train with like the Pioneer time, Chad Lyman. So it's like seeing all these good people. And that's why I like, you know, I love you guys up there, Chad, Ari. I haven't met Jason yet. He couldn't make it to Arizona because I believe there was like a health thing with the corona with that. But, you know, just meeting all these people, it's like finally I'm finding myself and surrounding myself with people who are all like-minded, you know, and just want to be positive and try to push a good thing and get things out there. So that's kind of my story with Invictus. And like I said, it's been a great ride. You know, they give you free swag, and listen, I love the free swag. I'll rep it all day long. But for me, it was more about making the connections, you know, and networking and just trying to do the good thing. And Invictus is a very good group to do that with.
Yeah, I've known Ari for a long time. I've been out to his school. He's been out to mine. We have mutual friends through obviously Keith Owen and Pedro Sauer and stuff like that. But yeah, Ari's a good dude. You know, always trying to bring the art into the future. And you know, I remember back when he had Submissions 101, and that was when I first kind of met him, way back in Submissions 101. And I had done some video or something for like a rolling Kimura, and he messages me. He's like, "Hey, can I put that on Submissions 101?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then the next thing I know, it's got like, you know, hundreds of thousands of views and everything else.
Yeah,
That was pretty cool. And then I trained with him a few times, and he's got other mutual friends of ours like Bryant and Foster and guys like that. So it's always been a good experience. And without giving away too much, hopefully this year we're going to get involved with some things with Invictus between all of us, and maybe hopefully get some seminars back out there around the country. So hopefully that.
You got to push it. You got to push it up here on the Northeast, man. The Northeast policies for this are ridiculous. It seems like when you go outside of the Northeast, agencies, you know, tend to pick it up. But it's funny you said with Ari's thing with the 101. I sat there and I never knew he had 101, and then I was like, oh shit. I'm like, God. So maybe it's like things were meant to be, because like everybody thought that mine was originally 101, and then Ari's had 101. I was like, no, that's not what it is. It's 10-1. But it's maybe things are meant to be. But like the work you guys are doing up there in the Northeast is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, to see the support you guys get up there, I mean, that's I would love to see that in New York and start to grow. But you know, it's tough grounds right now.
How did you find us? Just in the program that we run, just based off social media?
Yeah, based off social media, I started, you know, and listen, I'm not a social media guy. I hate social media. I think it's the most ridiculous thing out there for certain aspects. But for like what we use it for, to try to push out positive, good information, you know, information that can be beneficial to help people get home safe, it's a good thing. And then when you meet people or get back in touch with people you haven't seen in years, I think it's a great thing. But then like to network like how we are, I think it's huge. And that's how I met, you know, just I started searching through and I see things that I like and I just follow it. And I'll continually follow it until I see maybe something I don't like or a message that I don't agree with. And you guys are never that way. And then I saw the Officer Survival Series and I'm like, I would love to see, let me check this out. And, you know, that's when I reached out to you. And you know, that's when the first time we actually communicated like normally, like normal human beings, like over a phone and not just through social media and all that, which was really cool. And actually when I went up there to see you guys for the first time in person, it was actually really cool, because then it's like to see how social media can be used for something beneficial and good. You know, that's the only positiveness out of social media.
I don't get it.
So definitely when you're inside the bubble, so to say, it's like you don't see that far. And from my point of view, from, you know, working with Rob and seeing everything that's happened with the Officer Survival Series from just the past few years, when he would do, you know, one seminar, 2 seminars a year, 3 hours, to where we're at this right now, where, you know, he's doing 3, you know, 8-week courses throughout the course, maybe 4. It's like, it seems like it's growing exponentially. But how's the attitude with police officers? Is it still, I don't need training? Is it, where is it at? Because it seems like it's kind of getting over that hump that you guys have been fighting for quite some time.
Well, as somebody who works in academy, I can tell you this right now. Now, I work for the sheriff's office, and then our counterpart, Suffolk County PD, that we're all in the same building. And I know the guys upstairs on the 3rd floor with PD, they're defensive tactics guys. 2 of them up there are now black belts. A good friend of mine, Carmine, who I did a lot of training with, and another guy, Joe Riley, out of Sarah. So they actually have 2 black belts now on the 3rd deck, you know, involved in their defensive tactics program. I'm a black belt on my deck. We have adjunct instructors with DT. Some of them do have some experience. Some of them are very, very green. But those guys that teach DT, for the most part, that we use now, really want to like do more and get more involved. But it's not those guys that I worry about. It's the ones that just go on their every daily thing, whether it's on patrol or inside the jails. You know, it's like I put out that we have a group and we send out a mass text. And I don't know how many people this individual has in this group me app, but I believe it's over 100 or 200 people. And he'll put out, hey, grappling today at the academy. There's no cost to it. What we do is, like, if we have nothing going on, like if I wasn't doing this today, I probably would have hooked up with him like, hey, you want to do a little time on the mat, and then we'll find mat time, and then he puts it out to a whole group. We might get like 2 or 3 people to come back. So I don't know why the big disconnect is on that. I think the reason is because people believe that when you put that shield on, people are just going to listen to what you have to say and they're going to be compliant. And in reality, nowadays, it's actually opposite. That people are more combative now, and they're actually more amped not to listen or comply. And I don't know. I don't know if they just think that, you know, their little tools on their belt are going to work effectively, and that's what's going to do it. But the ones that you get to change their minds, you know, we get text on, oh, how much it helped them and they got home safe. You know, so I don't know. I tell every recruit, if you knew that you were going to be a fight for your life on this date at this time, when would you start your training? And they're like, oh, I would start it, you know, way before that. I go, so what are you waiting for? We don't have the luxury of knowing when. But, you know, everybody just likes to roll the dice, I guess. Well, not everybody, but a large majority roll the dice, and they just hope that it doesn't, or they hope whatever they know primitively wise will be enough to, you know, to help them survive. But I don't know. I see it as a life insurance plan. You know, you spend $150 to $200 a month on going to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school or taking class in self-defense. That's like a life insurance policy. You may never cash in on it. You may never need it. But when you do and it's there, it's going to be effective. But I don't know. People just don't like doing that. I don't know what the disconnect is.
It has changed a lot, because if I go back, you know, I got hired in '97. I was already training, you know, back then. And when I came on board and went through the academy, you know, the training was horrible, it was stupid, it made no sense at all. It was like a big waste of time. I left the academy completely disappointed after my tenure there as a recruit. I left there like I had all these high hopes for being pushed, and I got there and it was a joke, you know. And then when I got to field training and on the road and working as a cop and going to in-service, it was more of the same nonsense. And back then, when I, you know, it doesn't take long. I was never a guy that went somewhere and said, "Oh, I train." I wasn't like, you know, trying to sell it to them back then.
Right.
But it became pretty obvious quickly to people when, you know, you get into some situations, you have to grab somebody and put them down and cuff them. It became obvious to some of the supervisors and other officers pretty fast, like, "Hey, kid, what do you know? You clearly do something." And there was a lot of resistance in the beginning when they would ask me, "Oh yeah, come." Some people were interested, and then others were like, "Oh, I've been a cop for 30 years. I don't roll around the ground with somebody. We don't have to do that," you know. And it was almost like, you know what you know, but we don't need to know that. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense to us, and don't have. They were all people that grew up, you know, 20, 30 years before us. Their generation grew up watching Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee, and that was their vision of martial arts. And they didn't care what the UFC was, or, you know, the Gracie family. None of that mattered. I think nowadays, all these years later, all those people are gone, and the new generation coming up the ranks grew up with mixed martial arts. They grew up with jiu-jitsu, and that's their vision of martial arts. So I think now you're getting a lot more of those people taking on roles like you do as an academy instructor. Therefore, they have some say in what's going on. That didn't exist back, you know, 20, 25 years ago.
Well, I definitely agree with you. And we are seeing the culture change here as well. I mean, because we're having the younger people come in who, you know, are not, you know, the older guys like how I was, or like I have the same experience you have, Rob. I came into the academy. I was like, oh, I can't wait. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. And when I graduated, I was kind of like, that's it. You know, I'm like, okay. And, you know, it just is what it is. And you move along. And I can say from then to now, the level of professionalism is definitely increased. And also the professionalism of the officers that are now coming in has increased. Because back in the day, you'd come in for training you'd be slotted for the whole day. But the biggest question was, when do we go for lunch? How long do we have lunch? And everything was rotated around that. Whereas now when they come in for training, it's, if you're scheduled for 8 hours, you're probably going to get 8 hours of training because we got to get so much to you. But the old mentality has to go out. So I just always try to preach positivity and be like, hey, listen, we need this, and let's just learn it. And if you don't like it, then don't use it. But like we were teaching handcuffing, our sheriff here is very, very proactive with training. He wants training. He's this, that. Unfortunately, he also does realize the handcuffs that are on us when it comes to DT, especially living in New York. It's a very touchy type thing, especially with the chokeholds now being banned and the way City Council in New York City did it compared to what we do. But, he's very proactive. So we actually, in service, started doing handcuffing, handcuffing techniques, because you and I both know when we watch people handcuff, it's such a horror show. There's so many bad YouTube sensations out there with the handcuffing. So we're like, hey, let's just do some handcuffing because you know what? People can't get hurt. It's a very easy thing to do, and this and that. And even with that, you have an old salty guy come in like, oh, you're going to teach me how to handcuff? I've handcuffed, hundreds of people. And you hand them the handcuff, and yes, anybody can put the handcuff on. But when you understand that if you do have a method behind it and ways of doing it, you actually look professional. And so I try to say, if we look more professional, maybe we get more money instead of the old school pig pile, just get the handcuffs on and whatever way we can. And so we are seeing a culture change. The older generation is, and the older generation is now starting to change with this younger generation. The younger generation, I agree with you, is definitely more, up to speed on it. And I also tell them, whereas we need to be more up to speed, realize this too. Most kids now that are in their 20s at one point in their life went to either a karate school, a taekwondo school, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, because that's where parents brought their kids. So now you have a much higher chance of dealing with a subject who has some form of training.
Yeah, absolutely. I just put an article up on the Officer Survival website, officersurvivalseries.com, and just put an article up there over the weekend, and it talked all about how I've done a lot of activities in my life, from being all the way from growing up as a kid, teenager, and into it as an adult. And I got 3 kids. They all did the same thing, and my wife. And every one of those activities, whether it was football, baseball, basketball, soccer, martial arts, track, didn't matter. Every one of those activities had something in common with the other. They had competitions, but they also had routine, consistent training and practice. Yeah, you go to practice every single day. And when you're in season, every single day you got practice. You played soccer, Rich. Like you had practice all the time. And what team would ever take the field on any given day and have not practiced? But yet us in law enforcement, it's very, very common that we're out there every day playing these little games that can potentially turn into a real big game with almost zero practice on a consistent basis. And and I think it's a big mistake.
No, it's a huge mistake. And we as taxpayers pay for it because right after the whole incident in Minnesota happened with George Floyd, we revamped a lot of stuff here. And unfortunately, we took out the lateral neck restraints. We're not allowed to choke around the neck. If you go around the neck, New York State now if you have a badge on, it's a misdemeanor. You can be charged with a misdemeanor, even if you're fighting for your life. A lot of the most ridiculousness I've ever seen in my life going out with this. But now I have to tell all these people now that they can't choke, even in a DPF situation. But as we're sitting there and we're going over all this, I'm sitting back thinking like, you go out and you train, right? And they're like, yeah. I go, so the training you get in the academy, okay, is 40 hours of defensive tactics, 40 hours. And then you're released into the public with like a great superpower, because the superpower that you have is you can actually use deadly physical force on another person, and you can go hands on a person and not be held really accountable for it because you're doing it under the scope of your duties. But like you said, we send these people out, ill prepared and not prepared. And then what happens is we have these multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Eric Garner cost the city $5 million. The Floyd case, even before anything was found guilty on the officer, they paid out like $20 million. These are all huge, and that comes out of taxpayers' money. I researched a Petco dog groomer. Before Petco allows somebody to groom a dog alone, they get like 400 or 500 hours of grooming before they allow them to like even groom a dog. But yet here we let a human being leave an academy with 40 hours of, DT training. And then boom, that's all you need to know. And now go out and serve the public. And So something that, they say will cost too much to do training wise, you know what, you're right, it does cost a lot. But you know what, in the end, how much is it really going to save you? Because just think, if Eric Gardner was done properly, 5.9 million not out. If Floyd was done, 21 million civil lawsuit not done out. So that, and I understand the administrators, they want to balance budgets and this and that, but all right, well, the county's paying out a lot of money with misuse of force, either excessive or not enough. So, and then they replace it, Rob, with the tools. Let me give you a taser. If you look up tasers from individual agencies, they're only like 40% effective. But if you go to Taser, they'll tell you they're 98% effective. Of course, that's their thing. They're selling it. They're going to tell you it's great. But you and I both know it's ineffective. And if it is effective, the officer that deploys it doesn't use it the way it should be used. So, those are just cheap ways of training. Oh, here, we give you this 8-hour course, and now, because anybody can point and shoot. So to me, I think if you give them a real set, real skill set, like what you give through Officer Survival, what Invictus puts out, what Chad puts out, what I try to put out, if you give them a real skill set, you give them confidence, and then you also give them the ability to handle a real situation with maybe not even having to go to those tools. And then it's at a lower level, but it's one of the uphill battles, and the fight because you're a pioneer in it. You've been doing this a lot longer than me, and you've created a great thing up there. And that's one of the things we have to fight for here in New York.
It's funny because, you said, 40 hours in New York? Last I checked, Connecticut, I think it's 23 for defensive tactics in the police academy. So they get 23 hours of defensive tactics training. Now they do add in some other hours for like baton and taser and OC. That's in addition to the.
Well, that's our 40 hours includes that. So our 40 hours includes 1 8-hour day of baton. And then, just baton. Everything else is defensive tactics.
And you were talking about the taser. Did you see the recent video where the guy had put hand sanitizer all over him, and then because you're not supposed to taser somebody with those kind of chemicals.
The alcohol base, yeah.
The guy was on fire. They all run out of the room, and then they come back. They still don't have any method of putting the fire out. He kind of put it out himself. He died.
Right.
He died in a burn unit. So
that's going to be a huge. What state did that happen in? I saw the video.
Let me look real quick. I have it on my page there on CT Combatives. It's
because no matter what, whatever state he's in or county, they're going to be held accountable. But there's going to be a liability payout on that. They're going to say, "Oh, the officers know that they shouldn't deploy that on those circumstances." And it's an unfortunate thing that happened up here in the city. I don't remember the exact year. But it involved the ESU guys. There was a guy on an elevated platform in the city. When they want to close the doors, they have the garage, and it brings the steel down in front so that nobody breaks into their store when they're not there. There was an emotionally disturbed person or a person with mental health issues standing on top of this, swinging like a light bulb. And I believe he was a lieutenant at that time, ordered his guys to use the taser to get him down because they felt like it was going to go bad. So he used the taser. The guy fell to the ground, which was like 6 or 7 feet. And he ended up the way he fell, he ended up dying. And of course, the city and all the politicians jump all over this lieutenant. And now they want him held accountable for that death and this and that. But meanwhile, this guy was just trying to do the right thing, trying to protect his men to make sure everybody got home safe. And unfortunately, a tragedy did occur. And that decision did cause that subject to lose his life. But very sad story is because of all the pressure from the media and the agency, this lieutenant ended up taking his own life, and it was just an absolute shame. It shouldn't be like that, to where you're hesitant on where you want to use it because you're going to be judged like so much at the end. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's Catskill, New York.
Oh yeah, so especially in New York, I'm sure there's going to be a huge payout.
Yeah, it's right here. The New York Attorney General's office is investigating the death, and it happened in their lobby, Catskill Police Department. So it's one of those things, and you could talk about 1,000 videos. It's very common circumstance is that there are and I'm not saying that's 100% what happened here, but it kind of looks like it. Afraid to go hands on, afraid to grab somebody, put them on the ground, put their hand behind their back, and arrest them. And they, like you said, resort to the Batman tool on the belt, and then it fails, or they didn't use it properly, or whatever. And I'm not saying that this guy doesn't have some responsibility. He's the one out there ripping his shit off and throwing shit on his body and acting like an asshole. But maybe he's also going through a mental thing. Maybe he's going through some kind of a situation, and
Yeah.
we got to take those things into consideration. I also look at it like you're talking about how, X number of hours for training, whether in the academy or in service. And at the end of the day, I get it. They got to provide us with training, but this is not a 9 to 5 job. This is not a job where you're like, hey, work's over, I go home and shut everything down for the day. Like, this should be a lifestyle. This should be,
Yeah.
you are swearing, you're taking an oath, you're raising your hand and saying you're going to do all these things and protect others and put your life on the line. And that doesn't end at the end of your 8-hour day. That should be something that follows you every second of every day for your whole career, and even then after.
Yep.
Where you are preparing for those moments. You are putting yourself out there, training, putting yourself in positions of whether it's physical training, running, weight training, grappling, striking,
Yep.
takedowns, firearms, tactical medical. You should be researching and developing yourself beyond what they're giving you in your normal. They can't train everybody every day. They have to answer calls.
No.
And you have to take on the responsibility of making yourself into something more than you were when you started. And I think if you don't want to do that, and honestly, you don't belong in the job, go do something else. I used to tell people when we drove Crown Vics, you want to drive a Crown Vic and answer calls, go be a taxi cab driver. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to drive a police car and answer calls, then get out there and do it. And I think that's a huge problem in our line of work, is so many officers, like you said earlier, oh, when's lunch? How long is it? That's why I don't give them lunch at the officer survival program. We do a 6-hour day. I give them little breaks throughout the day for a power bar and drink. And because as soon as you send them to lunch, the day is done.
It's done. It's over. They're not come back. If they come back, it's in food coma state.
They're going to go to the Olive Garden for an hour and a half and eat everything under the sun and come back, or Chili's or whatever. And they are completely done for the rest of the day.
Yep. And Rob, echoing on what you say with the training, in the academy, the staff that works here with us at the academy, like all my coworkers, we all have that same mindset. We try to push that professionalism. And on that day one, when we deal with the recruits on day one, like one of the first things I always ask them, I'm like, you swore an oath. What'd you swear an oath to? And what's crazy is some of these younger kids. So I don't know if it's a failure in the school system or just a failure. Like, I told them, you raised your hand and swore an oath, and what'd you swear the oath to? And they're like, I'm like, they'll say the Constitution. I'm like, yeah, the Constitution and the New York State Constitution. I'm like, do you even know when that paper was signed? Do you know what's in it? So what are you really swearing an oath to? And then, like you said, I always reinstill throughout the career, you swore an oath, and that oath includes taking care of yourself, because you are not only a 911 for the community you serve, whether it's an inmate population or a community population. I said, because that's who you serve. I go, you're also responsible for me, because you're my 911 if something happens to me. So, like, if something goes bad, you need to protect me. And if you're not taking care of yourself to where you physically can't fight for a certain period of time, or you don't know what you're doing, you owe it to me, you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your family to, like you said, invest in yourself a little bit. And I always make a joke. I'm like, yeah, everybody will call me a buff because of this and that, yada, yada. I go, but go out to my vehicle. Do you see one sticker on my car that says, a sheep, a sheepdog with the blue line, or a wolf with the blue line, or a Spartan hat with the blue line? No, the only thing I have on my car sticker-wise is my Monster sticker, Monster and Invictus. That's it. But you go out to some of these other people who can't perform a job because they don't invest in themselves, and somehow I'm the buff, but they're not. But they got all this, I'm the gatekeeper on their car, And it's like, to me, I'd rather have somebody who can perform than share all that nonsense on their cars and not perform. So I always say, so who's the buff, me or you? And I don't know. As I get older and later in my career, I become a little bit more outspoken, and sometimes that's bad. Because I just try to be good, but I'll call them out on it. Even with the chokeholds, Rob, when I had to tell these people that they couldn't choke anymore, they were all upset. And so my thing was, how often do you go to the range and train with your firearms? And they go, at least once a year. And most people do it more because shooting is, Hollywood. It's cool. It's fun. I go, so in your career, how many times have you practiced choking? And they're like, never. I go, so where are you so proficient in choking that you think that you could choke somebody in a deadly physical force scenario and be professional at it and the way it's supposed to be done? And all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. I go, if anybody should be upset, it should be me, because I've been training choking people for 20, 21 plus years, and I know how to do it effectively, and it's an effective tool, but now I can't use it. So now I have to find another way. So it did kind of open up some people's eyes that way, but at the same point, the old school, oh, I got to choke them. But people don't even understand what a choke is, what a lateral, the carotid artery choke is, and, it is what it is, but it definitely have to invest in ourselves.
Kind of like back when they limited pursuits, or up here in Connecticut, when I first got hired, you could chase people for everything. And then a few years after, they started limiting those pursuits, and you would hear people bitch and moan and complain, oh, there's no more pursuits. And these are the same people that literally you could drive by them and throw a kilo out the window, hit them in the head, and they wouldn't pull you over. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
You ain't pursuing anybody, dude. You're not really a cop. You're riding. I'd like to do a warrant for you for impersonating a police officer. You're walking around in a uniform, but you never really do anything. So it's exactly the same thing you're saying here. Is these people all complain they can't use a chokehold, but they wouldn't be able to show you how to put on a actual neck restraint the proper way. They couldn't even show you.
Way, no.
Not even once.
And they never practice it. It's like I said, it's like I practice all the time. We practice it all the time. And we don't have any injuries because, Rob, I know you've been doing this a long time. Has anybody really gotten seriously hurt at any of your courses?
Knock on wood. Knock on wood. No. But I will say that I've had a couple of people that I've known over the years and I'm not a doctor, but I have friends that are doctors, and one that is actually not only a doctor and a trauma surgeon, but a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under me. Actually, he's been on the show before, Yoni. And they will tell you that as safe as like a carotid restraint can be, we also have to understand that when we're doing them in training, we're doing them against people that are not having a mental breakdown,
right?
that are not high on methamphetamines, that are not going through excited delirium, that are not obese and completely out of shape with all these issues and problems. We're doing it on another person that's generally in good condition and good health. So, that's one reason. The other reason could be, when it's real, it's like if you're rolling in class, you have a certain level of resistance that you'll face from your opponent, and a certain level of resistance that you're able to give back. If you go to a tournament and compete, all of a sudden that level of intensity is much higher, because the endorphins that are released in that moment, that you're putting it on the line a little more, you're in front of a crowd, you have people watching, you go against someone you never gone before against, you're supporting, you're standing up for your school or whatever. So now there's like a level, there's another gear you hit in competition, right? And then same thing would be for MMA, but now of course a real fight. So now in the real world, you may be squeezing much harder than you're even capable of in training. Okay. It may not be as perfect as in training. And I think the other big reason too is that, there also can be people that have plaque that builds up on their carotid artery. It's very, very rare, but you can, that can break off and can shoot to your, brain or something, cause a stroke. Or you could actually tear your own carotid. And this happened to, a couple of people around the country over the years, more than a few, where they resisted the choke a lot instead of just tapping, and actually tore their own carotid by trying to force themselves out of it, and ended up with a stroke or some severe injury. So while it is not as dangerous as I think the media tries to portray it, not even close, I also think it's not as safe as maybe sometimes every jiu-jitsu guy wants to pretend like it is. It has to be it has to be done right. It has to be done in the right circumstances. There's rules and regulations for it that should exist like anything else.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. All those key points you hit, that's what I do share with a lot of people too. Is like when we're in the in the academy training, or we're here, like we had an injury in our last one, but it had nothing to do with DT. They were warming up and they were going sideways, the lateral, stretching out the legs, and the recruit twisted the ankle and ended up really a high sprain, and I think it was a possible fracture. So it wasn't really combative. So you will have those little injuries, but the reason why we don't have injuries, especially in like your course and anybody that I've trained, because we're very observant. We watch, and when we see things not going good, we stop it. When you see someone applying a technique wrong, we stop it. And the good thing with training is if it doesn't feel right, we can tap out or say, hey, stop, and the person stops. So that's really why injuries are low on this side of the spectrum. But like you said, on those other ones, we're not dealing with the normal person who's doing it for health reasons and this and that. Usually drugs are on board somehow. They have drugs in their system, comorbidities and all that add up to it. And I always tell them, if you don't know the exact way of doing that carotid choke and it turns to a windpipe choke, the body cannot be without air. It can be without blood to the brain for a very short period of time. I believe what is it, like 4 to 6 minutes, and then you could turn into a vegetable. But if you take off air, now you start having those comorbidity problems, which is the lungs and the heart and all that. And that's where the issues lie. And that's what people don't understand. They're like, oh, happens all over jiu-jitsu schools. Yeah, but that's because there's people like you and Rich who, when they're instructing, like a lot of my students like, hey, you want to roll? I'm like, no, I got to watch right now, because you want to watch to make sure that people are doing things right, that the class is flowing, and that's how injuries stay low. So that's a huge part, you know, in the training aspect, and that's why you probably don't have higher injuries, because you have a high level staff.
The issue too is that most police training programs, whether it's in service or not, they try to make you drink out of a fire hose. So they basically say, oh, you're here for 5 days, 8 hours a day, you know, doing this DT stuff, and then you're not going to do it again for who knows how long, years, right? And now you're not used to it, and you're in there for 8 hours every single day for 5 days in a row, and by Wednesday you're eating Advil or ibuprofen and Tylenol like candy, and your body can't heal fast enough. You can't retain the material because it's too much too fast, and that's how injuries happen. You know, that's why I cut our training days to 6 hours, and I give them a lot of breaks, and I let them do it. And in Connecticut, as you know, we did it once a week for 8 weeks to develop a pattern, to develop the ability for them to have a break between the days so their body can heal, so they mentally can absorb what they did and replay it in their minds and retain it. And it also develops a behavior of, hey, I just trained for 2 months. I trained once a week for 2 months. And now it's almost like, hey, I can keep doing this. Versus, oh, 5 days and I'm done. They throw the certificate in the corner, and they wear the T-shirt a few times and they don't train anymore. You know, so I think that's also the issue, is training too much, too fast, not having proper instructors. You have a lot of times you have instructors that went through just a 5-day course themselves or a 10-day course, and now they don't train all the time themselves. They don't recognize what you or Rich or myself would recognize, or some other jiu-jitsu black belt that's trained for years, that can see the bad things happening. When I was sitting in that fight the other day, watching a reality fighting, you know, talking with my son and other people there, and I'm like, oh, he's going to get triangled. You know, there was a fight going on. I'm like, oh, he's about to get triangled. And there was several other people there. They're all like blue and purple belts. And then, you know, basically about 10 seconds goes by and the guy gets triangled. And they're like, you know, I never even saw the triangle until the last few seconds. And I'm like, yeah, but as a black belt, I can see the path further back than you can. I can see them setting it up, you know?
Yeah, you're seeing the setup.
Injuries. You can see the injuries coming before they happen, and you can stop them, like they're saying. And I had another point to make. It'll probably come to me in a second, but that is a big thing. Oh, the other point I was going to make is so many police agencies, they treat everybody like glass. How many times have you been told, oh, don't get hurt, don't get hurt, don't get hurt, don't get hurt. Oh, you're going to do this, don't get hurt. They constantly are telling you not to get hurt. And when you treat people like that, they start to believe they're going to get hurt all the time. If you treat people like glass, they're going to break. It's just the way it is.
We call it Dr. Summeroff up here, because usually if you do anything, if you want Summeroff, they'll step on the mat and be like, oh, so we call it Dr. Summeroff. But going back to the things that you said about the way you train it with that breakdown, I'm not going to lie. When I signed up for your course, I was like, all right, good. It's 8 days. At first, I originally thought it was 8 straight days. So I'm like, all right, that's good. I'm not a person that likes to travel. You know, I had I don't want to say a bad marriage, but not a good marriage, not fighting wise or anything. It was just like we grew apart. And now the person I'm with now, I really enjoy being home with. So I don't really like going away for long periods of time without her. I kind of like to drag her along with me, because I enjoy my partner in life finally after 40 years. And so when I first saw your course, I'm like, all right, 8 days, it is what it is. I'll just suck it up and do what I got to do. And then I started looking, I'm like, wait a second, it goes from here to here. That's not 8 days, it's 8 weeks. I'm like, this is 8 weeks of training. And I was like, wait a second. I looked at it further. I'm like, okay, so it's 1 day, 8 weeks. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. This is weird. I have to say, that is absolutely one of the things that I took away from your course that I'm trying and you know, trying to influence over here. Because we do a 5 or 6 day block of DT. So it's just all day straight, just DT. We have a lot of class we have to schedule. So it's a little tough to schedule everything with instructors and get people in. But the way you do it, where it's that 1 day a week, I have to say, I was like, oh, that's the ticket right there. This is a big item, because number one, I'm older. And listen, I love jiu-jitsu, but being on a mat for 8 to 10 hours out of a day, that can beat anybody up. I don't even think professional fighters spend that much time on a mat every single day, for 5 days. So that break was really nice. I don't like popping the leaves, but if I would have been on the mats that many, you definitely am popping the leaves and drinking whiskey. So, and the way that you said also is like, I hit them for 6 hours, then they get to home, they digest it. You digest it, you take it in, because when I did come back, I started thinking like, well, why did he do this? Why did we do this? How does that work? And this and that. And I start to implement the things that I really like. So that was definitely one of the things in your series that I really liked, is that was once a week, allowed time for recovery, and it was no nonsense. You get there, you train, and then you're done. Instead of those long lunches and breaking out, doing stuff like that. So
I had about 3 or 4 chiefs in the last few months tell me that they like it because they don't lose somebody for an entire week.
Yeah, scheduling make it a lot easier, I would gather.
They lose them for 1 day a week, and they don't lose them for a whole week. We have this restaurant up here. We both go to it with our wives. It's called Jay Gilbert's, to give them a little plug. And they're a very high end, like steak and stuff like that, dinners. And I love the place, and as does he. But if I just sat down and had a full meal at Jay Gilbert's and had my whole lobster mac and cheese and steak and everything else and dessert, and then they opened the doors and came over to me and said, "Hey, we're gonna bring you another one and another one and another one." Like at some point, I'd be like, I can't eat anymore. Like I'm done. And that's the same thing with training. No matter how good the training is, no matter how interesting the instructor is. How many times have we been to those super seminars where it's like 4 or 5, 6 hours?
Yep.
The first two,
it's a long day.
By the end of the day, you're like, I can't take another second information. I can't take it.
Yeah, it's definitely long. That's one of the things I really loved about it. Because like I said, I'm going to be a forever student, and it's like I got that black belt, and we all say that you don't chase a belt. I think, listen, when we all start the journey, we all do want to hit the epitome of, the rank of Jedi, and you get there and you're kind of like, that's it. And then that's when you realize that now it's just really, 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 the journey is really starting to open up and begin, because I find myself now more than when I was a white belt, like listening to everybody. And I'm talking about like white belts will tell me stuff all the way up to black belts. And I kind of sit there, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I truly believe I can learn from everybody, whether it's a white belt who might have saw something I'd never seen before, all the way that more experienced person. So, and I think that's when I got black belt, I said, shit, my journey is just really just starting right now. It's really like I'm just a white belt now, but I just know a lot of stuff. So it's just being that forever student and being able to be open to it is huge. And like you said, that's the ego thing that we face in our job. People aren't willing to do that. The way I do it is this, Rob. If I go to a place and I teach general topics, I teach use of force, we teach DT. If I'm teaching, like, let's say a general topics thing and I'm teaching a course and then I see somebody teach the same course, I like to sit in their course to see how they teach it, because if they're better than me, that elevates my game, because I want to make my game better. I want to figure out what can I do to change my game to make it better. So I kind of use that in all aspects of my life, no matter what I have to teach. And, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do, but I'm never satisfied. You told me that quote, practice makes perfect. And I'd be like, no, it doesn't. Practice makes permanent, because there's no such thing as perfection. So I'm always striving to be as good as I can, knowing that I'll never be perfect.
Yeah, I got that quote from Sid Kelly probably 20 years ago. Sid Kelly is a legend in judo, especially up here in the Northeast. And he's in his 80s now. And he still goes, this is a long time ago, he was old, still on the mat training. And he told us that changed my perspective on a lot of things. Because if you can practice all you want, but if you're not practicing correctly, it doesn't really matter. You're just creating a behavior that's going to be hard to change later. And I'm lucky at both of our academies. We have a lot of instructors, a lot of black belts. Myself, Rich, and just Jerry and Mike, and all these different guys. And I will routinely every month, and I might be the head coach, I might be the owner, but I will go out there every week and take a class from somebody just as a student. I did it last week, Rossi. I literally partnered up with somebody. I was a student. I didn't say a word. He taught, I did it. And I went through the class like a normal student. And I think that gives you a break from teaching sometimes. It gets you get to see, someone's style and how they deliver something and the examples they use. And you get to feel what it's like to be the student. Like when you're just out there and going through the moves and learning with someone. And last week at the officer survival program, it was the first week of the 8 weeks. And there was a guy that has, he's a brown belt. He trains a lot. He teaches a lot of police, Eric Lundell. He texted me like later that day. He's like, I got to tell you, that was awesome. He's like, I don't remember the last time I went to a police class and I wasn't the instructor. So to go there and not have the pressure of teaching and to be out on the floor and just learning and practicing, he's like, that was great. So
yeah, no, and the whole experience I had up there with your guys, and I know Rich is sitting there with you, so I'm not blowing sunshine up his ass. So I speak truthfully, and like even just sitting with Rich on the side of the mat and just talking about technique and little things that he likes to do, the little things I like to do. And I've been up to your place a couple of times, and then I met Rich at the Frank Mir seminar. Even then, we were sitting on the side talking about little side things, and then training with you, Jerry, even Andre. Izzy, right? Is it Izzy? Isaiah?
Yep.
The guy, like, and I think Andre's a purple belt, and Izzy just got promoted to purple belt. Like, even like sitting down, just talking with them on the side, and like this, like I went up there and like I learned what I learned in the office survival thing, but then still just picking up the little things from everybody else, just on all the sidebars we were having, it's incredible, and that's how you always continually are better, and that's how, like, I like to bring like some of the stuff that Richard told me, Jerry told me, the other guys, like even you, like I bring it back to my students. I'm like, hey, you got to try this. You know, I learned this from, you know, Ari when I was in Arizona. I learned this. I give people their props, you know, but it's just, I feel like if I learn something from somebody else, I feel it's really effective. I want to share it with my students to make them even more effective, which is a huge thing in the BJJ world. And then one thing that BJJ is changing, we can actually cross train a little bit now without, you know, being put on the blacklist, so to say.
No, yeah, absolutely. My coach, Pedro Sauer, always calls that the salt and pepper. Like, no matter how good your meal is, you might have little spices that you want to throw on it for a little extra. And those are all the little tidbits that you grab from other people sitting on the mat, talking to them. They show you a little extra things. It's like the added salt and pepper, you know? So
That's
it's kind of cool. But well, anyway, we're got the hour up here. It goes fast. And I know you probably got to get back to what the rest of your day. But I
want to get to retirement, Rob. That's what I want to get to, retirement. I'm done with this work thing.
That's where I am, right? So, we tried doing this several times, and the clouds parting in our way, and we couldn't get it done. But I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully this upcoming year, I'm pretty sure we'll train together a bunch of times. And
yeah, well, I'm gonna try to get up there next week. I know Tuesday you have something going on, right? And then Thursday, I'm just gonna check my schedule upstairs because we're a little lull right now because we just had one of the recruit class graduates. So if I could get out one of those days, I want to just get up there and just help you guys out at all if I can.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I enjoy waking up, staying in a little bit later, and getting on the ferry, taking a nice slow ride over, and visiting my northern friends up there. You know.
I'll leave you with this. He tells me, I'm going to embarrass him a little bit. He tells me that he likes to take the ferry because he can Netflix and chill. So then
I didn't know what that meant, man.
Do you know what that means?
Now I do.
So he looks up and he's like, "Oh, geez, yeah, I'm not doing that in the ferry."
That's
definitely not.
Keith Owen and Tinder.
That's right. That was a good one.
So we're all sitting around, and a bunch of black belts for butterflies, and they're like talking about different social medias and stuff. And someone's like, "Oh, you gotta get on Tinder." And Keith Owen, who loves going on social media and new aspects and always trying to find a new way to connect with people, he hadn't heard about it. He's like, "Oh, what's this?" It's like, and they start telling him, "Oh, we'll set you up, no problem." Then finds like it's a dating. Keith, he's like, "No, don't want it."
Who's the other guy? He actually, Anthony Mitchell. Yeah, he actually got the app and everything, put on his phone, didn't know, and then he didn't know how to get it off. So he actually broke his phone, thinking that he would. He would
just done.
Anyway, hey, great talk.
So listen, before I go though, I do want to shout out though, because I have to, because I get beat up a little bit on it. I have to be very grateful for the civilians that we train with. So I always want to. I know we always focus on the law enforcement aspect of it, but we got to focus on our civilian side as well. And I know you do that up there, Rich. Awesome. Because if it wasn't for the civilians that were training with us, we'd pretty much have nobody to train with because cops don't like to train. So I always give them a shout out, and I always want to say, thank you for training us to make us better, to serve you better, to make sure we get home at night. So, for all the civilians that are listening, I do appreciate you putting the grind in with us and making us better, as professional to serve you guys better in the public.
That's awesome. And you know what, to add to that is I think it's huge because cops like to hang out with other cops, right? So when you put them in a facility like this, where they're mingled in with people of all walks of life from all different jobs and stuff, now they're forced to mingle outside of their, police world.
Yeah.
They start to realize that, hey, not everybody's, a bad person. Not everybody, I've met a lot of cool people that just because they're not a cop doesn't mean I can't learn something from them. Right.
Yep.
And it also shows the public, hey, not every cop's, out to give me a ticket or out to, they're people too.
Yeah, exactly.
You start to see that there's two sides to everybody. And I think it's a huge way of getting the community and the officers to kind of cross over to each other.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then they understand use of force of why you need to apply things, so it's a win-win for everybody. So definitely grateful for all the monsters I train with up here and then all the other practitioners I train with. So
awesome. Well, thank you very much. You have a great week and
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, because I'll see you guys really soon.
All right, sounds good. Bye.
Okay, man. Bye-bye.